And so I went in for a meeting with him, and I said, well, if you're talking about Marvel, you kind of have three at the time. You've got Black Panther, you have Luke Cage, and you have Blade. So we went and saw the movie together, and that happened, and I was just like, holy crap. In a million years, I would not have expected that. I also wrote a script for Doctor Strange over at then Columbia Pictures.
That's crazy, because these are all the characters that ended up sort of involved, or at least referenced in those Tobey movies.
There was enough removed that I could just watch the movie in the theaters. I enjoyed it. At this moment, and he sees this nod, and he realizes who's got out. And we thought, oh, that's a story worth telling.
Did you know when we were writing back then, teasing the Mule in the very first scene of the show, that this would be the twist where you landed and this is where it's revealed? David, man, what's up? How you doing? Welcome to Face Hero.
Thanks for having me.
Dude, thank you for being here. Your resume, I feel like this is a guest we've been waiting to have on Face Hero for a while, and I'm thrilled to finally get a chance to talk with you. I mean, your resume, of course, we're going to talk about Foundation. So Foundation Season 3 finale spoilers are going to come later in this interview. So be warned, if you're here steering clear of Foundation, Season 3, Episode 10, the spoilers are going to be in the back half of this interview. So that's the fair warning. That finale is amazing, but we're going to talk about that in a minute. Dude, but your resume, I mean, Blade, Dark Knight, Man of Steel, Constantine and Blade on TV, Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. There's a lot of characters that I know our audience and myself as well have watched your work on through the years. I just want to start at the beginning of that, dude. What is it about the superheroes and the comic book adaptations that drew you to so many iconic titles throughout your career?
Look, I grew up in the 70s. I was a comic book kid. I mean, I was collecting first Marvel and then DC Comics and biking down to my local comic book store every day, and had designs to be a comic book artist and a comic book writer. And I wrote lots of, from the time I was in junior high and high school, letters to various comic books. I've got letters printed in the letters pages of Captain America and Swamp Thing and all sorts of stuff. So I was just a legitimate fan to begin with. And that was my, the Marvel and DC universe and some of the other indies, that was my happy place. And I never imagined that I would have an opportunity to go on and make a career out of sort of adapting this stuff, but it happened. And so I don't have to, I wouldn't say I have an encyclopedic knowledge, but I have a pretty damn good knowledge of those universes, and it's legitimate. I'm not coming to it as someone who's late to the game. My love for them. You can't see my office, but I a complete collection of Marvel Masterworks, like the hardback stuff and all the omnibuses, and I've got original comic book art, throughout, and so it's my love for it is genuine.
What's your favorite piece in your collection
of comics? Or I sold my comic book collection, I don't know, 20 years ago.
That's not easy to do.
Well, I sold it for pennies on the dollar. I ended up selling my whole collection to the drummer from System of a Down for like 10 grand, which is and I'm sure it was worth at least 100, but yeah. But I'm not precious about it now that I'd rather have the hardback versions of them anyway. I don't have to have the original, but I've got some Kirby pages and some John Buscema pages and some Coleman pages.
Whew, wow. Is it more daunting to write a movie adapting characters you grew up loving, or getting on a comic and trying to write a comic with a character you think?
Interesting. I haven't written a comic book in a long time. I would like to go back and write a comic book again. Probably, I'm sure movies. It's the, if you've got a good artist, I think it's easier to realize your vision in comic books than it is in movies. You've got to rely on so many other people and so many other, aspects of the film industry. There's so many. Sometimes I'll speak at film schools or whatnot, and I'll say to people, if you had any idea how many opportunities there were for a movie or television show to go off the rails, you would be amazed that anything good ever gets made, because it's ever, because it's like, it's just a miracle that anything good gets made.
Oh, especially now with how many moving parts and how famous people are and things like that, trying to schedule things and capture. Yeah, I can't imagine. But your journey with the comic book adaptations, I'm pretty sure Blade was the first in 1998, right? That was the original movie. I mean, to me, Blade was one of the movies that kicked off where we are and where we've gotten to with.
For sure. I mean, it doesn't get enough credit.
I agree.
And it snuck in under the wire. I mean, I had heard that Mike DeLuca, who's Warner Brothers now, was running New Line at the time. He was interested in doing a Marvel superhero movie, specifically with a black hero, because they'd had a lot of success with Menace to Society and House Party and Deep Cover, and, for lack of a better word, what they used to call urban films. And he also loves comic books. And so I went in for a meeting with him, and I said, well, if you're talking about Marvel, you kind of have three at the time. You got Black Panther, you have Luke Cage, and you have Blade. And they said, well, we want to make this for $10 million. And I said, then I would go with Blade, because it's sort of a horror film. You can do it for, a cheaper budget. And Marvel at the time was in bankruptcy, and was only focused really on like Spider-Man and X-Men and maybe a couple of other things. And they never even dreamed that they could make movies out of these sort of secondary and tertiary characters. Certainly never dreamed about making a movie about Blade, who is not very well known. And they definitely were not interested in doing an R-rated movie. And
just showering in blood. I'm sure that was an easy pitch.
Yes. And so at the time, I believe Marvel optioned to New Line the rights for Blade for $100,000. Wow. And they didn't put their logo on it either, because they were afraid to. They were trying to distance themselves from it. But it made so much money. And then the second movie, I think they got $500,000. And finally, for the third movie, they got $1.5 million. But then they realized, oh my God, we can make viable franchise. They don't just have to be the A-tier characters. If it's a good concept, we can. It sort of, exploded the opopportunities for them.
That's crazy how Marvel was just giving stuff away back then too, just to stay afloat.
Completely. They were terrified of it. They thought it was going to ruin their brand.
And then I think it really, if not for Blade, and of course, obviously, like Spider-Man and X-Men quickly followed, but Blade was there first. And I don't think if we didn't have Blade, that we might not have the boom in movies that we ended up getting.
I agree.
And then, 2024 rolls around. Deadpool and Wolverine brings Wesley Snipes back. He looks straight into the camera and says, there's only ever been one Blade. There's only ever going to be one Blade. As the man who helped write that character and bring him to movie life. I don't know if you've talked about this before. What was that like for you to have that moment, so many years later?
Well, it was crazy because I had heard rumors that there were going to be some crazy surprises in Wolverine Deadpool, or Deadpool Wolverine. So I deliberately avoided. I just didn't want to hear about it, because I was like, and my kid I've got 3 sons. So we went and saw the movie together, and that happened. And I was just like, holy crap. In a million years, I would not have expected that. And so, look, I was delighted. And I think in part, it also came out of this sort of meta narrative, because Marvel had so many problems trying to do the new Blade movie that I think, well, I know it was Ryan's idea, and he just proposed it, and they said, screw it, why not? At the very least, it'll get the character back in the public conscience.
Yeah. No jokes about Mickey Mouse, but make a joke about our own Blade movie. Go for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's funny. And then Blade was 1998. I was getting ready for this interview. Is this real that you wrote a Venom script in 97?
Yeah.
Like the full script is online.
Yeah. I don't know if it's my script, but yes, I did. I haven't checked, but yes, I did write, because I originally wrote Blade in 94, and it took 4 years until the movie came out.
Yeah.
And after they were happy with the script, and then New Line was interested in what other Marvel characters we could do a kind of similar approach, it's sort of more R-rated, violent approach. And so I did write a script for Venom. I don't even know why it fell by the wayside. I have no idea. I also wrote a script for Doctor Strange over at then Columbia Pictures.
That's crazy because these are all the characters that ended up sort of involved or at least referenced in those Toby movies.
Yeah.
There's the Strange reference from JK in that movie. There's obviously Topher Grace becomes Venom. You weren't writing it with that in mind, though.
No.
No, that was a separate thing. That's cool. I also, dude, I mean, we talked about Marvel. I got to show you something. I'm a huge Man of Steel fan. I used to this came out when I was in college, and this is like outside the theater. They had the slips of what was showing inside, and I would just borrow them and never give them back. But I have a pile of these from 2013 to 2014. I'm sorry, Carmike Cinemas on Forest Drive in Columbia, SC, but I'm a huge Man of Steel fan, man. I think like that movie is great.
Thank you.
It's cool to talk to you. Most of you, I love that movie so much. And it's fun now to have a new iteration of Superman. And I've already seen you weigh in on that and stuff. What is it like to see a character that you got to do your iteration of, to deliver your version, which is a sum of people's visions? You know, you're the pen, and then Zach and Henry and everybody come in to work on that. To then see it handed off to a new generation. What is that experience like for you? Because it hasn't happened with Blade yet.
It's fine. I don't have I mean, it's sort of like, I liken it to when a creator would do a run in comic books, and then, you know, whether it be sort of Mark Waid or John Byrne or someone like that, that'd be like a really storied run. And then someone else would come along, and maybe that run wouldn't be quite as interesting. And then someone else would come along and it would be amazing. And so I think that they're not yours, these characters. There's these toys that you get the honor of sort of playing with and doing your take on them. And that's kind of how I feel about the cinematic versions of them. And I think that I would have been bummed if Gunn had decided to out Snyder, you know, with Man of Steel. So I think it's much more interesting to have the pendulum go the completely other way and to do a totally different interpretation. And I also think that these characters are kind of a reflection of the times, and people get the hero that they need at the time.
Yeah.
And so in my case, it had been, you know, almost a decade. So there was enough removed that I could just watch the movie in the theaters as a fan and enjoy it or not. And in this case, I enjoyed it.
Yeah. I mean, I love the new iteration of Superman.
But I didn't feel like, oh my God, they got it wrong, or they dissed my version of it or anything like that.
No, I think most reasonable people know you guys have that sort of understanding that these characters live on in other ways. And, you know, then you have, Gunn has those monkeys behind sometimes people arguing with each other, and they're sometimes arguing with themselves. I don't want to stir up anything, though. But I was listening to you on Happy, Sad, Confused with Josh. I love Josh Horowitz. He's a great guy. And I listened to you talk about the kind of personal experience you had on Blade Trinity and how that kind of left you in a tough place. And I'm curious, like, I mean, that sounds like it came from sort of personal experiences with people involved in the movie. But then sometimes, like, I remember like the theatrical cut of Batman vs. Superman. You set out to make, you know, the best movie you can. The Ultimate Edition, which is more of your vision, I think, is we revel in that. Theatrical cut wasn't super well received. So when something like that happens, like, how does that compare to something like Blade Trinity, where personally you didn't have the best experience, and sometimes, you know, it's so many people talking about it.
Well, it's a bummer, and it's what I alluded to at the beginning of the interview, which is there's so many factors that even with the best of intentions are out of your control, even if you're the director or if you're the showrunner of a show. And so it can be heartbreaking if something comes out and it doesn't really adhere to the vision that you had in mind. But it's also, that's the, you know, those are the circumstances in which you're working. I mean, if you want to have something come out and have it be solely your vision, write a novel. You know, it's a collaborative art form, and it's an art form that requires, not these days, an investment of tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. And so there's going to be compromises. There's going to be factors that are going to weigh in that you don't have any control over. I remember when I was at USC Film School, and my first screenwriting teacher said, if at the end of your career, you're fortunate to have some things made, because many people industry and make a living at it, but never have anything made. But if at the end of your career, you're fortunate to have made a few things, and you can walk away with one movie or one show that you're truly happy with, you should consider that career a success. And, I've probably got at least 10 now. So I'm, I like to say, a third of my work I'm super happy with. A third of my work is a push, and a third of my work I wish I could have a pseudonym on,
Yeah.
And most of the time, the work that I wish I could have a pseudonym on, circumstances completely beyond my control ruined it, or in some cases, you can write a script and then be rewritten. You only need to have written a third to get credit on it, but a bunch of other people could have written on it. You would have no control over what they did or what they changed, and yet your name is still on it. And that's happened in some cases where it's, I think that the finished product bears little resemblance to what I wrote. The Ghostwriter movies would be a version of that.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. I wasn't on set. They were both scripts were massively rewritten. I had no control over that whatsoever.
That just sounds incredibly frustrating.
I'm
not going to lie to you.
It is frustrating. But then you get Man of Steel and the Bat movies and, 2.5 of the Blade movies and Foundation and Sandman and, whatever.
You either die a hero or enough cooks get in the kitchen to die a villain, to become the villain.
Yeah. The most frustrating thing is, you're on Reddit or something like that, and someone's ripping apart a scene that ostensibly you wrote that you had nothing to do with. That's hard, but what are you going to do?
Dude, it's interesting. I'm doing I've been interviewing for 10 years, and I started professional wrestling 2 years ago. And now I will read the comments on my wrestling matches and some of the storylines I'm thrown into. And I'm like, I had an idea that would
exactly.
But then also sometimes I have to give credit. There are ideas that win that I'm like, hey, that was better than what I would have done.
Totally.
So, and I don't think, I feel like obviously you probably understand that light years better than I have experienced myself. But doing any sort of public work is any sort of art at all is interesting in that regard. I talked to Christian Bale once at the Thor. Well, I'll talk about a movie that had an interesting reception, Thor: Love and Thunder junket. But I talked to Christian Bale there, and I said, I think I'm probably the 100th person to ask him, what would it take to get you back as Batman? And he said, only if Nolan ever went back would he ever go back. Do you ever sit there and fantasize, or right in your head, where after nodding at Alfred, Christian Bale's Bruce Wayne went to?
I can't imagine. I mean, look, if Chris called me up and said, I have an idea to do another, would I absolutely consider it? 100%. But that was intended to be the end. And that, I remember after The Dark Knight came out, I don't know, 3 or 4 months had passed. Chris typically would, maybe I'd hear from him, maybe not. And he called me up after 3 months and said, do you want to have lunch? And that was, I realized, oh, he's entertaining the idea of talking about another movie. And I don't even remember who said what, but I remember sitting at lunch and we were talking about the movie, and the first idea we came up with was that last scene.
Oh, wow. That was the first thing.
That was the first idea. And then we knew we had a movie that he got out, because then we said, okay, so the deal is Alfred's his proxy father. He's worried that Bruce sees no way out of this other than suicide by Batman, death by Batman, right? Mm-hmm. That's what he's focused on, and he's never going to get out. And he's worried that that's where his sort of adopted son is going to go. And he thinks that that's where his adopted son went. And then he's at this moment and he sees this nod and he realizes Bruce got out. And we thought, oh, that's a story worth telling, right? We had no idea what the rest of the movie was, but we had the end.
That's how
I do think it would be, I don't know what the idea would be, but to come to sort of undo that ending
What a gamble it would be. I mean,
Yeah.
an insane gamble. Maybe like one day, 30 years from now, we get like Kingdom Come with
Sure.
like Christian Bale and Henry Cavill or something like
Sure.
that. I don't know what else you could possibly do because that's a gamble to go back to.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean,
so-
I'll be really interested to see what they do with Iron Man and Doomsday, like whether or not they.
dude, because that how do you top Endgame? I mean, I don't think you top Endgame, and it probably has to be the way in. You can't think of it that way,
Yeah.
you know. Like, but how do you now bring Robert Downey Jr. back in a way that doesn't undercut it? I think Deadpool and Wolverine did a very creative job with Hugh returning after Logan.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So you keep up with yours. You really watch all these, huh?
I have 3 sons. We see most of these things. Yeah.
It's funny. I'm releasing a podcast with Frank Grillo about Peacemaker on Friday morning, and he told me that his sons are the reason he's all in tune with all of it too. He's like, they watch everything Marvel, and now they watch everything DC.
Yeah.
I was like, hey man, that's gotta be cool as a parent. Your kids.
What's funny is we'll watch Peacemaker or Deadpool or whatnot, and my kids know that I know the lore better than they do. So they will see some rando character and say, "Is that a character that's actually in the comics or not?" And I'll say yes or no, or
They'll probably, hey Dad, can you introduce me to that guy?
Sometimes they do that.
Yeah, that's cool. That's pretty cool. So do you feel you've done so much work that we just touched on, and we're about to switch over to Foundation. So spoilers for Foundation. This is your warning. If you need a way to get your podcast player ready to pause, this is your moment. This is the last non-Foundation question. Do you feel like you've checked all the Marvel, DC superhero boxes you want to? Is there anything that you were like, I wish I could have got my hands on that? Or Kevin and James, you want to talk to them about anything? Like, is there any character you're like, that's the one I would go back for?
I mean, never say. I sort of feel like I have done it all. I mean, and I always loved Doctor Strange. So even though my version of Strange was quite different, that would have been fun to do. But look, I would never say never. But right now, I've done so many superhero movies that I'm one of the reasons why I was excited to do Foundation and work on Murderbot is just they were just something different,
I got to catch up on Murderbot because I listened to the audiobooks to get ready, and I haven't finished the audiobooks yet.
Yeah.
But with Foundation, I haven't read the books intentionally because I don't want to know what's coming. And actually, we're about to talk about one of the switch ups you did in this season 3 finale. So, all right, this is it. This is Foundation season 3 finale spoiler discussion starts right now. Everybody listening, everybody watching, that you've been warned. Before talking about this epic finale, I want to go back and shout out the fact that you had that sequence where Azura's entire lineage was threatened to be wiped out.
Yeah.
That to me is one of the most standout moments of the entire show still to this day.
Thank
That
you.
is incredibly written. It required no violence and no action to assert the dominance of the Empire. Did you know when you were writing that how powerful that moment would be?
I remember both my writer's room and Apple had doubts that would work.
Oh.
And I said, I think I have an idea. And I sat down and I just said, what is the most devastating, evil torture I can possibly come up with that just shows how depraved this guy is?
Oh.
And that I wrote that scene, and that we shot that scene first draft. That was
wow.
And everybody loved it. And but that's a classic example of sometimes a notion in an outline. You have to write it to see it. It's all about the execution, right? And the dialogue. And how do you, if you just were to pitch that as just a one-liner, it wouldn't sound that interesting. And it's all about the slow, kind of subtle way that Day kind of comes around to his point and sort of seduces the audience in.
Was the hand motion from Lee in that scene something you wrote, or is that Lee coming up with that on? Because his performance in all these iterations are
so. The motion was he
He did it earlier.
We worked on what that was.
Because he did it before they hang people and all. That kind of is his
yeah. And once we had worked that out, then we were like, yeah, let's do that together. So that was sort of a collaboration.
Yeah, that scene to me is like that was when it solidified. That's that moment of like Sophia walking out of the barn in Walking Dead, or the hatch or things like that, where I'm like, I'm with this till the end of the line now. Like I was in, and now I'm like irreversibly in.
Yeah,
and it's only gotten better since then, in my opinion. And we've seen in previous seasons, penultimate episodes or episodes leading to a finale tend to be the more explosive episodes than finales themselves, whereas finales tend to be these sort of like, hey, here's the loose ends, here's some big moments, but also
all in action.
Yes. This season 3 finale is not that. This is not chill, bro. Like you went all out.
It's like 6 climaxes. It's like,
holy shit. I loved it, man. Why did you make this season the one where the finale is the one where everything happens in the biggest way?
Because I try to be cognizant of how the audience watches television these days.
Yeah.
And I think like with Game of Thrones, there was this notion that that's what would happen, is that 9 would be the big episode and 10 would be the sort of falling action. And that's kind of how we fell into things in Foundation season 1 and season 2. And I wanted to shake things up, and I wanted to break the pattern, and because I think that unconsciously audiences fall into a pattern, and they come to expect certain things or certain rhythms. And I think so. I always try to think of myself from the audience perspective as well. And I knew also that this season we weren't going to do like 100-year jump in the next season. So I just wanted to like basically like throw the table over and have the audience just say, how the hell does this show possibly survive now?
Dude, I have questions and I'm going to ask them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I've been listening to different, Foundation podcasts and watching different things that YouTubers, like I watch Pete Peppers, I've listened like the Core podcast, and there are there's times where their expectations and opinions align with what I'm thinking might happen, and sometimes I'm like, oh, that's an interesting. Do you ever, because you talked about, it sort of sounds like you played with expectations a little bit by packing it into 3. Do you ever, or into the finale with 3? Do you ever look at what the conversation is to find ways to get out of the expectation or subvert the expectation? I also figure you probably can't pay too much mind to what the discourse is.
You can't. And also we're writing these seasons so far ahead of when the audience, we were writing season 3 a year before season 2 came out.
Yeah.
So that aspect of it, now sometimes it's interesting based on reactions from season 1. But we're filming it, so by the time we were filming season 3, season 2 would come out. And so sometimes more so I would say I pay attention to that, to Reddit and whatnot, in terms of like unanswered questions that things are people are still curious about.
As a Lost fan, thank you.
Yeah.
As somebody who did 6 years of Lost, and there's questions I wish Damon put in there. Thank you for doing that with Foundation.
Now, in some cases, there are questions that like who brought down the Star Bridge. I was always planning on answering that, and I was always planning on answering it in season 3.
Well, you know what's interesting? You bring up Reddit. After I watched this finale, this is the major spoiler, guys. This is the thing that everybody's been talking about. The Mule is revealed as Beta, and I actually was like, wait, I didn't see that coming. So I Googled Beta the Mule to see if people had been talking about it. And there was one person on Reddit who said that pointed out, and rightfully so, that Beta's been at all these moments the Mule has been attached to. But people were like, no, it's just program. Like it's. I
know. And I thought I was amazed that more people didn't guess that. Also because I think by now we sort of trained the audience to say, this is the kind of show where every little thing matters. Pay attention to all these little tiny moments. And it's fascinating to me that I think I might have seen that one person, but it's fascinating that some people would mention it and then they would just discount her for all sorts of reasons. And I maintain that one of the reasons they would discount her is just because she's a woman.
I think so too. I think that's the case because I think
we
everybody
expect our villain to be like Thanos, or we expect our villain to be a guy at least.
Yeah, it's just this sort of societal expectation, I think, with media that you think the Mule, you go, who is he? You know
Yes.
what I mean? Who is the villain? Who is he? And that's not always the case, but I think a lot of people just default to that. And so I want to ask you because the Mule in episode 1, like the very first voiceover of the show, the Mule is mentioned. Obviously, the Mule is part of the novels and everything. But when did you kind of land on this? Did you know when we were writing back then, teasing the Mule in the very first scene of this show, that this would be the twist where you landed and this is where it's revealed?
Yes.
What?
Yeah. Most of this stuff, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that a lot of this stuff was planned from the beginning. I mean, when you watch
So how far do you have written right now?
Well, I wrote a document that's like 2 pages long of like a loose document for what originally 8 seasons were going to be.
Wow. Okay.
And then, season 4 is being written now. And it's kind of like I don't think too much about future seasons until we get near the end of there's a broad plan.
Mm-hmm.
But as we were writing season 3, especially because it was connected to season 4, I had to think a lot about where season 4 would land.
Okay. All right, we'll talk about it. I have some questions about season 4, but I gotta the Mule is a change from the book, and I looked that up after seeing it because I didn't want to have anything ruined. And so I can't be one of those people who's like, oh, the book is better or the show is better. I prefer to watch this without having anything ruined for me. And I feel like that is a change that feels kind of bold for you.
Look, it is and it isn't. I mean, I'll be really curious to see what the book readers think of it when the show drops. Whether or not they think that's. On one hand, I think it's bold. On another hand, I don't think it's bold. I mean, we've been pretty up with people that there's more to the Mule than meets the eye. So I think there's only an expectation that the Mule will be Magnifico if you read the books and knew that in the books the Mule was Magnifico.
Right.
I mean, I think he's one of the potential red herrings or suspects, but there's no reason why it couldn't be someone else.
So talk to me about your reasoning. Is that something we're going to discover later on?
Well, my main reasoning is I just thought it would be more interesting. And when Asimov was writing the books, there are no female characters in the first book. And then Beta is one of the first fleshed out female characters in the second book.
Mm-hmm.
And she's also kind of canny in the second book and interesting. And I thought in a show that's where the villains are very male heavy, it would be interesting to have some female energy in there in terms of something that potentially is toppling, the empire. It would just be different. And I was banking on the fact that I think even though we've come a long way from the 1950s when Asimov was writing Foundation and almost no women were reading science fiction, and women didn't even have checking accounts back in the 1950s. I think it was not till the late 60s or early 70s that women could have their own checking accounts. And so I just thought that even though we've come a long way, we still never had a female president, that society has a tendency still to underestimate women.
Yeah.
And so I thought that could work in our favor in terms of, and I would argue that I was right in terms of people not suspecting her. Because there are some places where I think it's patently obvious, like in episode 8, where she tells the pirate to walk away and he just does, where I'm like pointing, like I was worried like that was going too far and people still didn't get it.
Well, now I feel dumb.
Yeah.
Oh man. And then there's been obviously one of the through lines of the show is this free will versus inevitability, and then there's also been the kind of special versus different sort of self-reflection, and Gaal is able to resist the Mule's power and love and all of that. What does that say? What do we take away from Gaal there?
Oh, is she special or is she different? Well, I think she's metallic, and so she's talented, but I would argue that she's not as powerful as Beta. And even if she hadn't been hurt, if she'd stuck around, she would have been done for. I don't think Gaal is capable of defeating Beta one-on-one.
I don't. Yeah. Well, you write this thing. So what I think doesn't.
I think Gaal will need a lot of help. I think Beta is way more powerful than her.
Yeah, this actually was the last thing I had planned on talking about. Now I got to find where I want to get to the questions because there's so much other stuff that happens in this episode. I was saving the Mule for the end, but I was just so excited to talk to you.
Demerzel, there's Day.
Demerzel, okay. First of all, is there a season 4 without Lee Pace? I don't mean to cut straight to the chase, but like what?
There could be.
Excuse me? Like, what?
We'll see. Here's what I will say: is I read somewhere a review that said we know Dawn won't die after the end of episode 5 because he's got plot armor, and I thought, because I knew where we were going with the season, I thought, well, it's interesting because I can think of 2 more characters who probably have even thicker plot armor than that we're gonna whack.
Well, as soon as he took the nanites out and was not protected, I was like, okay, this is for stakes. This is to really, emphasize that this guy can die, but he's probably going to be a long running thing where we know as an audience there's stakes because he can die now. And also, I didn't expect this to go down so quickly in the finale here, and it ends there and leave me going, wow, is there a version of this where we don't have Brother Day in season 4?
There might be.
David. There might also be a version of this where we don't have Laura Byrne. We don't have Demerzel.
But that's also what makes it interesting.
I completely agree, dude.
I think the show's really interesting when we're sort of beyond plot armor.
There's 5 different cliffhangers in this episode alone?
There's a lot.
So Demerzel sacrificed herself. Okay, before I get to that, season 2 sort of seemed to be about the Empire and their perfection unraveling a bit. And then this season seemed to center around Demerzel unraveling a bit in similar but different ways and leading to her sacrifice. Is that sort of parallel intentional? Is that something you did on purpose?
Yeah, and I think that one of the reasons why both Empire and Demerzel are unrolling quicker this season is because Volteri gave them the Prime Radiant. He knew it would mess them up. He knew that Empire wouldn't wield that power in a way that was judicious.
Right.
And he also knew that with the Prime Radiant, he'd be creating this logic bomb for Demerzel. And so it was, I think these things would have happened anyway, eventually, but I think they happened sooner rather than later because of Volteri's actions. And he did it. And was it prudent for him to do it? Probably not, but he did it at the end of season 2 because he was feeling butthurt because he didn't realize he wasn't the only Selden, and he wanted to be consequential. And he was worried that he was the left hand and not the right hand.
We also have the reveal to Harry that he is not, what he's been made to believe he is, or the opportunity isn't there for him. Yes. And to me, that's a huge moment going forward.
Yeah, well, also that Volteri's kind of going to become a villain now.
How would because there's nothing left to live for.
Yeah.
That
was always the plan, that there would be sort of in a way 2 Harrys, and that the one in the vault would start to diverge and become villainous.
So Selden's equation has all led to Dusk kind of unraveling to the max.
Yeah, no, I don't. It's not that Selden specifically knew that would happen, but you've kind of made clear that it doesn't come down to the small moments. No.
It's the bigger, grand scheming stuff that Selden was able to predict. So is it a fair read that Dusk killing the clones, killing Brother Day is sort of that, in what we know so far, that moment that Selden has feared for the Empire?
Yeah, or that he predicted would happen no matter what.
Yeah.
And I think that it's just Selden had it happen sooner. He put his thumb on the scale so that these events would happen sooner rather than later.
I've noticed that as Brother Dusk tends to get close to the end of their time, and we got to wrap this up here in a minute, so I got to get these last couple questions for you. I've noticed that as Brother Dusks start to get towards their twilight, they're on their way out, they tend to start thinking about legacy of themselves and the Dusks before them. And I feel like that is sort of what made this Dusk really go more than any of the Dusks before him off the rails and start taking things into his own hands. We end with take out the 2 thrones. It's just the one. With that in mind, what can you tease about where this Dusk wants to go and how he got here?
He's a mad king. He's completely there's no mitigating factors anymore. You know, it's he doesn't have Demerzel, he doesn't have a dawn, he doesn't have a day, he doesn't have even the whether or not he destroyed the Principium, so he can speak to his past selves. But there's no counterbalance. It's pure ego right now, and I think he has no concept of how to fix the galaxy. I think he knows he can't fix the galaxy, so he's just going to destroy it.
And how does the second foundation factor into that in the coming seasons? What are we?
Well, they're going to have a lot of problems because they've got the Mule, and they've also got the crazy Empire, and things are really, really bad for Gaal and the second foundation. It's going to be, but that's what hopefully makes it exciting.
Oh, I need season 4 yesterday.
Yeah.
Thank you, man. I want to say ending a season with a line of dialogue that says all the pieces are in place and making me wait however long until season 4 gets here. Diabolical and brilliant. Congratulations on that. Any idea when we'll see season 4?
I mean, usually I like them to be a year and a half apart, but based on our track record, it's probably going to be 2 years.
All right. Well, I'll be ready for it, man. Dude, yeah. David, honestly, huge pleasure to talk to you, man. Thank you so much for hanging out with me and talking about this and talking about all your work. And congratulations, dude. Season 3 of this show. Like, I feel like you hit a whole new stride and you guys are crushing it. It's such a beautiful, well-written show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I do think the seasons have improved as we've gone along. A lot of people involved in making that happen, not just me, but yeah, I'm very happy with it.
Well, thank you for your work on it and congrats, dude.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. See you in the next one, guys.